will soon meet a character known as the false prophet, who's more or less joined at the hip with the Antichrist, performing signs and wonders on his behalf. And, being a Jew, he will be a lightning rod for Muslim expectations concerning the despised Dajjal. History will prove him to be a poor fit. Neither the Christ nor the Antichrist will kill him at Lydda, as the Muslims inherit the earth, as they predict. But that won't stop the armies of Magog from focusing on him in a desperate attempt to vindicate their woefully errant eschatology. In truth, the fine points of Islamic theology have never been a very substantial guide to predicting Muslim behavior anyway, since they're specifically told not to ponder their own scriptures. So this shift shouldn't be completely unexpected. The Quran and Sunnah are confusing, contradictory, and open to a wide variety of interpretations, just what you'd expect from the father of lies. By the way, in case you were wondering, as I was, how Gog, a self-aggrandizing Muslim cleric operating in Iran, could possibly hope to unify a normally moderate Turkey and the former Soviet Islamic republics in holy war, the answer once again lies in Muslim expectations. Listen to what Abdul Rahman al-Wahhabi predicts in his book, The Day of Wrath. Quote, "The final battle will be waged by Muslim faithful coming on the backs of horses from the stands, carrying black banners. They will stand on the east side of the Jordan River and will wage war that the earth has never seen before. The true Messiah, who is the Islamic Mahdi, who will kill the pig, that's the Jews, and will break the cross, that's Christians, and will defeat Europe, will lead this army of Seljuks." Unquote. The Seljuks were pre-Ottoman Turks, ranging throughout northern Iran, Iraq, Syria, and the southern Caucasus regions, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. These areas are a pretty fair match for Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, specified by Ezekiel as allies of Magog. And please note whom the Mahdi will be rallying his forces against. Jews, duh. Christians, read Westerners, Middle Eastern Muslims really don't know the difference, and Europe, home base of the Antichrist, who has built his own reputation negotiating peace in Israel. Islamic expectations will lead them to their destiny like moths to a flame. Neither Muhammad nor later Islamic scholars realized, of course, that Gog and Magog would be Islamic armies. Actually, Muhammad thought they were extraterrestrial creatures that lived near the muddy spring into which the sun descended every night. Hey, I'm not making this stuff up, I swear. He told a demented tale of the mighty Muslim prophet Dhul Qarnayn, that is, Alexander the Great, if you can believe that, building a great wall of iron between two mountains to keep the hordes of Magog out. Quran 18, verses 99 through 102 says, "On that day, the day when Gog and Magog will come out, we shall leave them to surge like waves on one another. The trumpet will be blown, and we shall collect them," that's the creatures, "all together in one gathering in conflict, and we shall present hell that day for the disbelievers to see, all spread out in plain view. Verily, we have prepared hell for the hospitality of the infidels. Hell is for the disbelievers' entertainment." Unquote. As before, if you understand who the infidels really are, Muhammad's not that far off, but only because of the background provided by Ezekiel. One gets the feeling that the rabbis of Yathrib set him up, and he took the bait and ran with it. Another nagging question: why would a loving God allow so many nations, those comprising the armies of Magog, to fall into the clutches of Islam, a prison from which escape is next to impossible? Listen carefully to the following explanation offered through the prophet Joel. He's speaking of Phoenicia and Philistia, but the principle can be seen to extend throughout the Middle East.
Swiftly and speedily I will return your retaliation upon your own head, because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my prized possessions. Also, the people of Yehuda and the people of Jerusalem you have sold to the Greeks, that you may remove them far from their borders. Behold, I will raise them out of the place to which you have sold them, and will return your retaliation upon your own head. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hands of the people of Yehuda, and they will sell them to the Sabians.
From Sheba, that is, Arabs.
To a people far off, for Yahweh has spoken. Joel 3:4-8.
Those nations who robbed Israel and sold her people into slavery ranged from North Africa to Iran, and all of them have in turn been sold to Islam, whose origins are, you guessed it, in the land of the Sabaeans, today's Saudi Arabia. But what was that about Jewish middlemen? The Jews of Yathrib were the unwitting stepping stone Muhammad needed to launch Islam into a going concern. First, they sold him scripture-based lies from the Talmud and other apocryphal sources, many of which found their way into the Hadith and the Quran. Then they served as the initial host for the Islamic parasite to feed upon. And feed it did, gaining strength until it could successfully infect pagans and Christians alike. Within 100 years, the entire Middle East had fallen. Now you know why. Muhammad tried his best to reshape a plethora of historic and Bible characters into his own twisted image. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Lot, Joseph, Solomon, Yahshua, and even Alexander the Great. The list goes on and on. Whereas the parallels between the founder of Islam and the heroes of the Bible are contrived at best and non-existent at worst, there is one historical figure who bears a striking resemblance to the madman of Medina. The lives and missions of Muhammad and Adolf Hitler are stunningly similar. The parallels are too obvious to ignore. In a previous chapter, we explored how the same demonic spirit who controlled Nero is prophesied to inhabit the Antichrist during the last days. I believe, speculation factor of 3, that the same thing could be true of Muhammad and Hitler, that they were both possessed by the same demon. And I wouldn't be surprised to find the same evil spirit taking up residence in the Mahdi, Gog of the land of Magog, that is, the imam in charge of Iran when Ezekiel's World War III begins. He definitely has the same agenda. In Muhammad's words, kill every Jew. Ezekiel's list of the Islamic nations to be aligned against Israel, interestingly, didn't specify the Arab nations within Dar al-Islam, that is, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. Are they not to be participants in this war? I believe they are, but not as part of the Magog Federation. That is probably more surprising than it should be. Way back in Genesis, we were warned about the nature of the Arabs, or at least their patriarch.
Then the messenger of Yahweh said to Hagar, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so they shall not be counted for multitude. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Genesis 16:10-12.
If you're looking for the root of the madness of Islam, you need look no farther than the Torah. Even before he was born, Ishmael, the father of the Arabs, and you can note that his children were racially 3/4 Egyptian, was predicted to be a belligerent loner, literally an onager. The Hebrew word is pareh, a wild ass, of a man. But because he was the son of Abraham, Yahweh promised to bless him.
And as for Ishmael, I have heard you, Abraham. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Yishak, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. Genesis 17:19-21.
As Isaac grew, Ishmael's predicted animosity began to show itself. So Yahweh did something we would do well to heed today. He separated the warring children. He supplied Ishmael, but he made it clear that Isaac was the child of promise. They were not to live in the same land.
But God said to Abraham, Do not let it be displeasing in your sight, because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice. For in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and took the bread and a skin of water, and putting it on his shoulder, he gave it and the boy to Hagar, and sent her away. Genesis 21:12-14.
A few chapters later, we get this interesting insight.
Isaac began to prosper, and continued prospering until he became very prosperous, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds, and a great number of servants. So the Philistines envied him. Genesis 26:13-14.
I'm not suggesting that there's a genetic tie between the Philistines and the Palestinians, but since the Arabs within Israel insist on using that name, I find it fascinating that the source of Palestinian hatred for the Jews was identified as far back as the middle of Genesis. It's envy. God chose Isaac. Ishmael felt that the blessing should have been his. His envy led to a hatred of the Jews that's still alive today. Under Muhammad, the sons of Ishmael finally found their voice and their sword. They conquered a swath of territory extending from southern France across northern Africa through the Middle East and into India before Islam was 100 years old. Considering the prophecy about Ishmael, it should not be surprising that Arab nations would be players, even instigators, in the last great war, but would find themselves allied with no one but themselves. The key to their participation is found not in Ezekiel's prophecy, but in Daniel's. But before we go there, let's look at a bit more of Ezekiel's forecast.
Prepare yourself and be ready, you, Gog, and all your companies that are gathered about you, and be a guard for, or take command of them. After many days you will be visited, in other words, called to arms. In the latter days you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword, and gathered from many people on the mountains of Yisrael, which had long been desolate. They were brought out of the nations, and now all of them dwell safely. You will ascend, coming like a storm, covering the land like a cloud, you and all your troops, and many peoples with you. Ezekiel 38:7-9.
Here Gog's intended victim is identified, and the time frame in which they live. It can be no one other than modern-day Israel, for they are, 1. Gathered from many nations, 2. Brought back from the sword, an apt metaphor for the Holocaust, 3. To the land Ezekiel would have known as Israel, 4, which had long been desolate, uncultivated, and underpopulated, and 5, in which they are now dwelling in apparent safety, with a large United Nations peacekeeping force watching their back. Further, Gog's timing is specifically called the latter years.
Thus says Yahweh Almighty, On that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you, Gog, will make an evil plan.